Step 1. Find the ring size of the finger the hollow constructed form will be worn on. You'll use a ring sizer. When you look at the numbers, there will be regular numbers 1 through 14, and then there will be numbers with dashes next to them. If there is a dash, that is a half size. You want to make sure that you find the correct fit. It should fit snugly on your finger, but not be too tight or too loose. If it's too tight, you'll have a difficult time getting it over your knuckles, or it will get stuck while it comes off. If it's too loose, it'll easily slip off your finger. After testing out a few different sizes, find the size that fits on your finger and isn't too loose or too tight. When you have found your ring size, use the conversion chart to find the length of the ring blank. You'll want to account for the gauge of the metal that you are using. You'll also want to measure in millimeters. Make sure that you measure correctly, counting the length that it's supposed to be, and always measuring twice. Use a Sharpie to help mark those lines so that you know where to cut. When you are finished marking your metal and your ring blank, center punch the metal and drill an air hole. The air hole is essential for letting air escape as you are soldering the hollow form together. In this step, you can now begin to cut out your ring blank. Use your jeweler saw frame and a saw blade to cut out that edge and line that you created. After cutting the ring blank, you can now anneal the metal. Annealing is the process of heating certain metals to a point where their molecular structure is relaxed. With copper, you're going to want to look for a dull red. Turning off a light helps you to see that glow of the metal. After you are finished annealing, you can rapidly cool your metal by placing it in water. This is called quenching. To clean the surface of the metal and remove any oxidation that occurred in the heating process, drop the piece into the pickle solution. This is a mild acid and helps clean the surface. Always use copper tongs for this process, never using steel. Pickling is a 10-minute process. Once it is finished pickling, you can remove the metal and drop it into a baking soda bath. This neutralizes the acid on the surface. At this step, you can now form your ring blank around a ring mandrel. Use a rawhide mallet. As you have formed an open ring blank, gently tap the metal down on either side, flattening the ring shape so that it closes up the seams and will help with soldering. You want to make sure that there are no gaps in between that seam. At this point, you are now ready to begin to solder. With a hollow form construction, it is a multi-step soldering process. You're going to need to solder with hard first, which flows at 1450 degrees. You'll proceed on to medium and then easy. Cut a small piece of solder, also called a pallion. Now, cover the metal and the seam to be soldered in flux. This helps prevent oxidation when you are heating your metal with the torch. Pick up the pallion with your flux brush and apply it to that seam. This will also help to prevent oxidation from forming on that solder. You can now begin to heat your metal, slowly approaching the piece to make sure that as the flux boils, it does not cause the pallion to jump away from the seam. Make sure to heat the metal evenly to bring everything up to temperature and assuring that the solder will flow properly. Start to focus your torch closer to that seam as you start to notice the solder getting wet and about to flow. Once it is flowing, focus on that seam. Quench the ring form, then drop in the pickle solution. After 10 minutes, place the ring in the baking soda bath. You can now reform that soldered ring. Use a flat sanding board to sand a smooth edge on the ring. This will be essential for soldering it down to a flat piece of metal for the hollow constructed ring. Occasionally check the edge of the ring to make sure that it has been sanded evenly. Hold the ring against the surface of the metal you'll be soldering it to. Check for any gapping. If there is, you'll want to sand again. If there isn't, you can proceed to the next step of making the outside wall. Similar to the ring band, you'll want to find the correct length of this outside wall. Using your jeweler saw, cut the outside wall. Remember, it should be the same width as your ring band. So if your ring band is 1/4 of an inch, then the outside wall should also be 1/4 of an inch. I've cut my outside wall into 2 sections. I'm going to be creating a score and bend in the middle, as well as 2 lap joints. I'm using tape right now to create a wall. This will help guide my file as I am creating that score section so that I can effectively bend the metal afterwards. Using my files, I'm going to score into the surface to create that score and bend. The deeper I file into the metal, the crisper that bend will be. After removing the tape walls, I'm going to grab a flat nose pliers and gently bend my metal at that joint. This will close up the area that I've filed. After both walls have been created, I'm going to begin to solder with hard. This will ensure that the solder doesn't reflow when I solder it down to the outside base sheet metal. Make sure to apply flux to every single joint that you'll be soldering. Remember to cut and place a pallion at each section that needs to be soldered together. Turn on your torch, and just like you did for the ring band, slowly heat around that edge to make sure that the solder doesn't jump off as the flux boils. If you need to adjust any of the pallions, slowly move it back into place while you're keeping that torch on the surface of the metal. Remember that all hard solder flows at 1450 degrees. The metal should be heated evenly so that everything reaches the same temperature at the same time to ensure a proper flow in that seam. Repeat the same sanding process that you did for the ring band, making sure that the edge of the metal is nice and even. When you have finished sanding, place the wall on the base metal to check for any gaps. When you are ready to begin soldering, make sure that the band walls as well as the outside sheet wall has been cleaned and removed of any contaminants, such as oils from your fingers or dirt. Paint a fine layer of flux down on the surface, where your ring will go, and around the edge for your band wall. Make sure to apply flux to all areas that the solder needs to flow. At this point in the hollow construction form, you're going to be soldering with medium solder. Medium solder flows at 1360 degrees Fahrenheit. Cut several pallium chips that you'll place along the edge of the metal. The pallium should be placed about 1/4 of an inch apart. Place the palliums on both the outside of the ring band wall and the inside of the outside band wall. Begin to heat your form, watching for any solder that might move away from where you've placed it. Heat the surface of the metal evenly, including the sheet metal at the base, as well as the outside band wall and the ring band. Once you start to see the silver solder look wet, focus the tip of your torch along those seams to ensure an even flow. As you are about to finish soldering, check to make sure that there is a silver line at all the seams. Once all areas have been soldered, you can cut out the excess metal inside where the ring band is and on the outside band wall. Yet again, sand the surface and the edge of your metal on a sanding board to ensure that it will solder down evenly to the next sheet of metal. Check all areas for gapping and notice the sections that haven't been sanded. Once that edge has been evenly sanded, it is finally ready to solder onto that last sheet. Sand that sheet, making sure to remove any oils from fingerprints or any dirt on that surface. Check all of the seams to make sure that there is no gapping and to ensure that you'll have a nice even flow of solder, closing off your hollow form completely. The final stage in the soldering process, you'll want to use easy solder. Easy solder flows at 1325 degrees Fahrenheit. As you have previously, add flux to all the edges and surfaces that you'll be soldering. In your final solder, remember to carefully but quickly preheat your metal. Make sure to replace any solder that has moved off from the seam. Once it's at the point, make sure that you bring in the tip of the blue cone to the seams. Heat your metal evenly to ensure a proper flow of solder. When your form is completely soldered, place it back into the pickle for 10 minutes. When your form is clean, you can begin to cut out the excess metal, first in the ring area and then on the outside walls. Once your form is completely cut out, you're going to begin to file. Grab your small package of files as well as your large file. You can now begin to clean up and file the edges of your form. Make sure that you are not air filing. Filing the hollow form is an integral part to the successful craftsmanship of your hollow form. When filing the inside of the ring band, make sure to use a half round or round file. Once you have finished filing the edges of your hollow form, you can begin to sand. If you use the sanding boards and you begin at the grit 80, then you'll want to go through each stages of the grit, from 120 to 220, then 320, finally 400, and then 600. If you want, you can also begin at 320, move your way to 400, and then 600. You'll want to make sure, though, that you always finish your ring at 600, as this is also the final stage to the craftsmanship of your piece. You want to go through the same sanding process on the inside of your ring band. Again, going from grits 320 to 600. And there we have a step-by-step process of how to create a hollow form ring. My name is Rose Schlemmer, and thank you for watching.